Derek Johnson parked his car in the crowded lot of First National Bank on a sunny Monday morning. He wore a simple blue button-up shirt, faded jeans, and comfortable sneakers. Derek was a man who never felt the need to show off his wealth. At 45 years old, he had built a tech empire from scratch, but most people would never guess he was worth billions just by looking at him. He checked his watch as he walked toward the bank's glass doors. He had a meeting with his lawyer at noon, and he needed to handle some trust paperwork before then. The Johnson Family Trust, worth approximately $1.7 billion, needed some adjustments for a new charitable foundation he was launching. As Derek entered the bank, the cool air conditioning was a welcome relief from the heat outside. The branch was busy with the Monday morning rush. People stood in lines, bank tellers typed away at computers, and the sound of quiet conversations filled the space. Derek took his place in line, scrolling through emails on his phone while he waited. After about 10 minutes, he reached the front of the line. The teller, a young man named Greg, smiled politely and asked, "How can I help you today, sir?" "I need to speak with someone about making some changes to my trust accounts," Derek explained in his usual calm, measured tone. Greg nodded. "Let me get my manager for you. She handles all our high-value accounts personally." He picked up his phone and made a quick call. "If you could wait just a moment, Ms. Wells will be right with you." Derek nodded and stepped to the side, allowing the next customer to approach the counter. A few minutes later, a woman in her late 50s with short blonde hair and a navy blue suit emerged from an office. This was Patricia Wells, the recently appointed bank manager who had transferred from a small-town branch just 3 months ago. She was still eager to prove herself at this larger, more prestigious location. Patricia scanned the waiting area, her eyes passing over Derek twice before Greg pointed in his direction. Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly as she took in his casual clothing and relaxed demeanor. She approached with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Patricia Wells, the branch manager. You wanted to speak with someone about an account?" Her tone was noticeably cooler than it had been with the well-dressed businessman she'd helped just before. "Yes, I need to make some adjustments to my trust," Derek said, extending his hand. "I'm Derek Johnson." Patricia gave his hand a quick, limp shake. "And what kind of trust would that be, Mr. Johnson?" Her voice carried a hint of skepticism that was loud enough for nearby customers to notice. A few people glanced in their direction. "The Johnson Family Trust," Derek replied calmly. "I'd like to move some assets around for a new charitable initiative." Patricia's eyebrows rose. "The Johnson Family Trust? I don't believe I'm familiar with that account." She looked Derek up and down again, taking in his casual clothes with a dismissive glance. "Are you sure you're at the right bank? Perhaps you're thinking of the credit union down the street?" Derek remained calm, though he felt a familiar tightness in his chest. He had experienced this kind of treatment before. "I'm certain I'm in the right place. The Johnson Family Trust has been with First National for over 20 years. Patricia crossed her arms. "Well, I've been reviewing all our major accounts since I took over this branch, and I don't recall seeing anything under that name, especially not any significant trust." Her voice had grown louder, and more people were turning to watch the interaction. "If you could just look it up in your system," Derek suggested, keeping his voice steady. "I'm going to need to see some ID first," Patricia said firmly. "Multiple forms, actually." Derek reached for his wallet and handed over his driver's license. Patricia examined it closely as if suspecting it might be fake. "And a second form of ID?" she demanded, loud enough that everyone at the nearby counters could hear. Derek took out his passport, which he happened to have with him because of an upcoming business trip. He handed it over without comment, though he was increasingly aware of the stares from other customers. Patricia made a show of carefully comparing the two documents. "And do you have any documentation about this trust you're claiming to represent?" The word claiming hung in the air, heavy with insinuation. Two bank tellers exchanged uncomfortable glances, and an elderly woman in line whispered something to her husband. "I don't carry trust documents with me," Derek explained patiently. "But if you look up my name in your system, you'll find everything you need." Patricia let out an exaggerated sigh. "Sir, we handle serious financial matters here. If you're looking to cash a check or make a small deposit, I can direct you back to one of our tellers, but trust management is for our established clients with significant holdings." She spoke slowly, as if explaining something to a child. A warm flush of embarrassment crept up Derek's neck, but his expression remained neutral. He had built his success by staying calm under pressure, by not letting moments like this derail him. Still, it stung. "Perhaps," Patricia continued, her voice dripping with condescension, "the check-cashing store down the street might be more your speed. They don't require all the documentation we do." A few gasps came from people close enough to hear. One of the tellers, a woman named Lisa Martinez who had worked at the bank for 15 years, looked up sharply from her station. She had been helping another customer, but couldn't help overhearing the commotion. "I'd like to speak with someone about my trust accounts, please," Derek repeated, his voice still calm but firm. "If you're unwilling to assist me, perhaps there's someone else who can." Patricia's face hardened. "Sir, I am the manager of this branch. There is no one else. And I'm telling you that we have no record of any Johnson trust that would require my personal attention." She handed his ID and passport back with 2 fingers as if reluctant to touch them. "Now, if you'd like to open a basic checking account, one of our tellers can help you with that." Lisa Martinez had finished with her customer and was now watching the scene with growing concern. She knew exactly who Derek Johnson was. Everyone in bank management did, or should have. The Johnson Trust was one of their largest accounts nationally, not just at this branch. Derek took a deep breath. In all his years of building wealth, scenes like this one had played out countless times. In high-end stores, at exclusive restaurants, and yes, at banks. He had learned to choose his battles carefully. "I understand," he said quietly, putting his ID and passport away. Instead, he pulled out a small black card from his wallet. It was his private client card, given only to the bank's top-tier customers. "Perhaps this might help you locate my information in your system." Patricia took the card, ready to dismiss it as well, when her eyes caught the platinum trim and the E special marking in the corner that designated ultra-high net worth clients. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Lisa Martinez chose that moment to approach. "Mr. Johnson," she said, her voice warm and professional as she extended her hand. "I'm Lisa Martinez, Senior Account Executive. I recognized your name. It's an honor to meet you in person." Patricia's head snapped toward Lisa, her eyes widening in confusion. "You know this gentleman?" Patricia asked, stumbling over the last word. Lisa turned to Patricia with a tight, professional smile. "Yes, of course. Mr. Johnson is one of our most valued clients." She turned back to Derek. "I'd be happy to help you with your trust adjustments. We can use my office for privacy." Patricia stood frozen, the black card still in her hand as she began to realize her mistake. Around them, the bank had grown oddly quiet, with several customers and staff watching the scene unfold. "Patricia," Lisa said quietly but firmly, "Mr. Johnson is the trustee of the Johnson Family Trust, which holds assets of approximately $1.7 billion with our institution. He's been a client here longer than either of us has worked for First National." The color drained from Patricia's face as the implications of her behavior began to sink in. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Derek simply nodded, politely as Lisa gestured toward her office. "This way, Mr. Johnson, I apologize for any inconvenience." As Derek followed Lisa away from the counter, leaving Patricia standing speechless, he could feel the eyes of everyone in the bank following him. This was not the first time he had been judged by his appearance rather than his character or accomplishments, and sadly he knew it would not be the last. Lisa Martinez led Derek Johnson through the bank toward her office. She walked quickly, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The other customers watched them pass, their curious eyes following the man who had just been treated so poorly by the branch manager. Some of them whispered to each other, putting together what they had witnessed. Lisa's office was at the back of the bank, in the area reserved for private client services. Unlike the plain chairs in the main lobby, this section had comfortable leather seats and offered coffee in real mugs instead of paper cups. The walls were lined with dark wood panels, and the carpet was thick enough to muffle their footsteps. "Please make yourself comfortable, Mr. Johnson," Lisa said as she opened her office door. The space was neat and professional, with awards and certifications hanging on one wall. A large window looked out onto a small garden at the back of the bank. Derek sat in one of the chairs facing Lisa's desk. He placed his hands on his knees and took a deep breath, letting the tension from the public confrontation slowly leave his body. "I want to apologize for what happened out there," Lisa said, taking her seat behind the desk. "That was completely unacceptable." Derek nodded slightly. "Thank you, but it's not your fault. Still, that's not how we treat any client, let alone someone with your standing at our bank." Lisa opened her computer and quickly typed in Derek's information. "I see you wanted to make some changes to your trust. Is this for the new Johnson Foundation for Educational Equity?" Derek raised an eyebrow, impressed that she knew about his latest project. "Yes, it is. We're launching next month and need to move some assets to fund the first round of scholarships." Lisa smiled. "I make it my business to know what our important clients are doing. Your foundation has been getting some good press in the financial papers." She pulled out a folder from her desk drawer. "I've actually prepared some options for you to consider. I was going to call your office later this week to schedule a meeting." For the first time since entering the bank, Derek relaxed slightly. This was the kind of service he was accustomed to receiving. Professional, prepared, and respectful. They spent the next 30 minutes discussing the details of transferring $50 million from the main trust to the new foundation. Lisa was knowledgeable and efficient, asking the right questions and offering helpful suggestions about tax advantages and investment structures. As they finished the paperwork, a knock came at the door. Lisa looked up with a slight frown at the interruption. "Come in," she called. The door opened to reveal Richard Simmons, the CEO of First National Bank. He was a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and a tailored suit. Behind him stood Alan Porter, the regional director who oversaw all branches in the state. "Mr. Johnson," Richard said, stepping forward with his hand extended. "I'm Richard Simmons, CEO of First National. When I heard you were in the branch today, I wanted to come down personally to say hello." Derek stood and shook the CEO's hand, noting that the news of his presence had clearly traveled fast. He wondered if word of Patricia's behavior had traveled just as quickly. "And this is Alan Porter, our regional director," Richard continued. Gesturing to the younger man beside him, Alan stepped forward to shake Derek's hand as well. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Johnson. Your trust has been a cornerstone relationship for our bank for many years. Please join us," Lisa offered, gesturing to the extra chairs in her office. Richard and Alan sat down, both looking slightly uncomfortable. Richard cleared his throat before speaking. "Mr. Johnson, I understand there was an unfortunate incident with our branch manager earlier. I want to personally apologize for any disrespect you experienced." So they did know, Derek thought. He wondered how they had found out so quickly. Perhaps Lisa had sent a message, or maybe the scene had been dramatic enough that someone else had alerted upper management. "These things happen," Derek said simply. He had long ago learned that showing anger rarely helped in these situations. "No, they shouldn't happen," Alan insisted, leaning forward in his chair. "Not at First National and not to any customer, regardless of the size of their account." He paused. "Though I have to admit, with an account of your magnitude, it's particularly concerning." Richard nodded in agreement. "We pride ourselves on providing exceptional service to all clients. What happened today falls far short of our standards." Derek studied the two men. Their concern seemed genuine, but he had been in business long, enough to recognize when financial interests were at stake. The Johnson Trust was worth $1.7 billion. A client of that size could easily take their business elsewhere if they were unhappy. "I appreciate your concern," Derek said. "Lisa has been very helpful in handling the actual reason for my visit today." Lisa smiled at the acknowledgement. "We've set up the transfer for the new foundation. Everything is in order." Richard's face brightened. "Ah, yes, the Johnson Foundation for Educational Equity. A wonderful initiative. We'd be honored if First National could play a role in supporting your philanthropic efforts. That's actually why I came in today, Derek explained. We're launching next month with scholarships for 100 students from low-income backgrounds to attend college. Many of them will be the first in their families to pursue higher education. Remarkable, Alan said. Education changed my own life. I grew up in a working-class family, and a scholarship was what made college possible for me. As they discussed the foundation, another knock came at the door. This time it was Patricia Wells who entered, her face pale and her hands slightly shaking. "Excuse me," she said, her voice much quieter than it had been earlier. "Mr. Johnson, I wanted to apologize for my behavior. It was completely unprofessional and inappropriate." The room fell silent. Richard and Alan exchanged glances, clearly surprised that Patricia had come to apologize on her own. Derek turned in his chair to face her. "Thank you for saying that, Ms. Wells." Patricia nodded stiffly. "I made assumptions based on, well, that doesn't matter. What matters is that I was wrong to treat you that way. It won't happen again." Derek studied her face. Her apology seemed forced, likely motivated by fear for her job rather than genuine remorse. But at least she had made the effort to come and say the words. "I appreciate you coming to speak with me," Derek said. An awkward silence filled the room. Finally, Richard spoke up. "Patricia, we'll discuss this matter further this afternoon. For now, please return to your duties." Patricia nodded and quickly left the office, closing the door behind her. Once she was gone, Richard turned back to Derek. "I want to assure you that we'll be addressing this situation appropriately. Ms. Wells's behavior does not reflect our values as an institution." Derek understood the implication. Patricia would likely be fired or at least severely disciplined. While part of him felt she deserved consequences for her actions, another part wondered if firing her would actually solve the deeper problem. "Before you make any decisions," Derek said carefully, "I'd like to share some thoughts." Richard and Alan both leaned forward, clearly expecting Derek to demand Patricia's termination. "What happened today wasn't just about one person making a bad judgment call," Derek explained. "It's about systemic issues that exist in banking, in retail, in housing, in virtually every sector of our society. We take diversity and inclusion very seriously," Alan began, but Derek held up a hand. "With respect, most banks say that, but the real question is, what are you actually doing about it? What kind of training do your employees receive? What metrics do you track? How diverse is your leadership team?" Richard and Alan exchanged uncomfortable glances. The bank's executive team was predominantly white and male, as were most of its board members. "You make an excellent point," Richard admitted. "We could certainly do more." Derek nodded. "I've been thinking about something bigger than just this incident. Something that could actually create meaningful change." "We're listening," Alan said, his expression serious. "I'd like to schedule a meeting at your headquarters later this week," Derek said. "I have a proposal that might benefit both the bank and the communities it serves." Richard nodded quickly. "Of course. Whatever time works for you. Thursday. At 2 p.m., Derek suggested. "And I'd like both of you to be there along with your head of HR and your chief diversity officer if you have one." "We'll make it happen," Richard promised, already pulling out his phone to clear his schedule. As the meeting wrapped up and Derek prepared to leave, he thought about what he would propose on Thursday. This incident could simply remain an unpleasant experience that led to one person losing their job, or it could become the catalyst for something much more significant, something that might help prevent other people from experiencing the same treatment he had faced today. Lisa walked him back through the bank toward the exit. This time, the other customers and bank employees watched him with new understanding in their eyes. Word had spread about who he was and what had happened. "Thank you for your help today, Lisa," Derek said as they reached the front doors. "It was my pleasure, Mr. Johnson, and I'm truly sorry about what happened earlier." Derek smiled slightly. "Sometimes the most difficult moments lead to the most important changes. I'll see you on Thursday." As Derek walked back to his car, he began to formulate his plan. The Johnson Family Trust was worth $1.7 The next morning, Derek sat in his downtown office overlooking the city. The office was large but not flashy. Derek preferred practical, comfortable spaces over extravagant displays of wealth. His desk was organized neatly, with a family photo of his wife Karen and their 2 teenage children, Marcus and Zoe. He sipped his coffee as he went through his emails. Several messages concerned the incident at the bank, which had somehow leaked to a few financial insiders. Derek wasn't surprised. Banks were like small towns. News traveled fast, especially news involving a $1.7 billion client being humiliated. His assistant, Olivia, knocked on the open door. "Your financial team is here for the meeting," Derek nodded. "Send them in, please. 3. People entered the room. Ben Harris, Derek's longtime financial advisor, Maya Jones, his trust attorney, and Jamal Williams, the investment manager who had helped grow the Johnson Family Trust for the past decade. "Good morning," Derek greeted them as they took seats around the small conference table near the window. "We heard about what happened at First National," Maya said, getting straight to the point. She was always direct, which was why Derek valued her counsel. "Word is spreading through financial circles." Derek nodded. "I figured it might." "This isn't the first time something like this has happened," Ben pointed out. He had been with Derek since the early days, when his tech company was just a startup operating out of a garage. "Remember that investment firm in Boston 3 years ago? Or the real estate agent in Chicago who assumed you were the maintenance worker?" Jamal added with a frown. "The pattern is frustratingly familiar." Derek leaned back in his chair. "Yes, but this time feels different. I'm tired of just walking away and taking my business elsewhere. It doesn't solve the larger problem." Maya tilted her head. "What are you thinking?" "I have a meeting with First National's executive team on Thursday. I want to propose something more meaningful than just an apology or firing the branch manager." Ben raised an eyebrow. "Such as?" "I'm still working out the details," Derek admitted. "But I'm thinking about ways to create real systemic change. Not just at this one branch, but throughout the entire bank, and possibly beyond." "From a purely financial perspective," Jamal said, opening his laptop, "I should point out that moving the trust to another institution would be straightforward. I've already received calls from 3 competing banks who somehow heard about the incident. They're practically begging for your business." Derek wasn't surprised. A $1.7 billion account was a prize any bank would fight for. "I know we could move everything," Derek said, "but I keep thinking about all the people who go through similar experiences but don't have the leverage of a billion-dollar trust to get anyone's attention." Maya nodded slowly. She had known Derek long enough to understand how his mind worked. He had always been more interested in solving problems than in punishing people. "So instead of just leaving," she said, "you want to use your position to create change from within?" "Exactly," Derek replied. "The question is, what kind of change would actually make a difference?" The 4 of them spent the next hour discussing possibilities. They talked about diversity training programs, hiring practices, community investment, initiatives, and ways to measure real progress beyond just good intentions. As a group, they had centuries of combined experience in finance, law, and business, and they put all of that expertise toward crafting a proposal that would be both meaningful and practical. By the end of the meeting, they had outlined a plan that Derek felt good about. It wasn't just about addressing what had happened to him. It was about creating opportunities for others and changing the culture of an entire institution. "I'll have the full proposal drafted by tomorrow morning," Maya promised as they wrapped up. "Perfect," Derek said. "Send it to me for review and then we can finalize it before Thursday's meeting." After his team left, Derek sat alone in his office thinking about Patricia Wells, the bank manager who had treated him so poorly. His initial anger had faded, replaced by curiosity. What had led her to make such quick judgments about him? Was it simply her own prejudice, or was there something in the bank's culture that encouraged or allowed such behavior? He picked up his phone and called Lisa Martinez at the bank. "Mr. Johnson," she answered promptly. "What can I do for you?" "I'd like some information about Patricia Wells," he said. "How long has she been with the bank? What's her background?" There was a pause on the line. May I ask why you're interested? I'm preparing for Thursday's meeting and I want to understand the full picture. Lisa hesitated only briefly before answering. Patricia has been with First National for 22 years. She started as a teller and worked her way up. Until 3 months ago, she was the manager of our small branch in Riverside, a rural area about 60 miles from here. This downtown branch is her first time managing a major location. And her performance before this incident, by all accounts, excellent. She ran the Riverside branch efficiently, and her customer satisfaction scores were consistently high. This information gave Derek pause. Patricia wasn't a new employee with no track record. She was a longtime bank employee who had been successful in her previous role. The Riverside area, Derek said thoughtfully. What's the demographic makeup there? It's not very diverse, Lisa admitted. Predominantly white, middle to lower middle class. Very different from our downtown clientele. Derek nodded to himself. The picture was becoming clearer. Patricia had spent most of her career in an environment where she rarely had to interact with people who didn't look like her. Then she was promoted to a much more diverse urban branch without apparently any training on how to adjust her approach. One more question, Derek said. What's happening with her now? I assume she's facing some kind of disciplinary action? She's on administrative leave pending review, Lisa explained. There's a hearing scheduled for Friday morning with HR and the regional director. Most people expect her to be terminated. After finishing the call, Derek sat at his desk, deep in thought. Firing Patricia might satisfy some immediate desire for justice, but it wouldn't address the conditions that had allowed the situation to happen in the first place, and it certainly wouldn't help her understand why her behavior was problematic. An idea began to form in Derek's mind, something to add to the proposal he was developing for Thursday's meeting. It was unconventional, but it might actually lead to more meaningful change than simply punishing one person. Later that afternoon, Derek drove to his mother's house for their weekly dinner. Eleanor Johnson was 75 years old and still lived in the modest house where Derek had grown up. Despite her son's wealth, she had refused to move to a bigger or newer home. This house has all my memories, she always said. Why would I want to leave them behind? Eleanor greeted him at the door with a warm hug. Her hair was gray now and she moved a bit slower than she once had, but her mind was as sharp as ever. You're on the financial news sites again, she said, as they sat down in her small kitchen. The smell of her famous pot roast filled the air. Something about an incident at a bank? Derek sighed. Word travels fast. So what happened? Eleanor asked as she served dinner. And don't leave anything out, I can tell when you're editing the story. As they ate, Derek told her everything about his experience at the bank, Patricia's condescension, Lisa's intervention, and the swift appearance of the bank's executives. He also shared his plans for Thursday's meeting. Eleanor listened carefully, nodding occasionally. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. You know, she finally said, this reminds me of what happened to your father at that car dealership, back in 1982. Derek remembered the story well. His father, Howard Johnson, had been refused service at a luxury car dealership despite having cash for a new car. The salesman had assumed he couldn't afford it and wouldn't even let him test drive the vehicle. Dad just went to another dealership, Derek recalled. Yes, he did, Eleanor agreed. And he told himself that was the right thing to do. Take his business where it was wanted. But he always regretted not speaking up, not demanding better treatment. He felt like his silence allowed that behavior to continue for the next black person who walked through those doors. Derek nodded slowly. That's exactly why I don't want to just walk away this time. Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Your father would be proud of what you're doing, using your position to create change instead of just escaping the problem. That's real leadership. As Derek drove home that evening, his mother's words stayed with him. By the time he arrived at his house, his resolve had strengthened. Thursday's meeting wouldn't just be about expressing his dissatisfaction or threatening to withdraw his money. It would be about presenting a vision for what the bank could become and using the full weight of the Johnson family trust to make that vision a reality. Thursday arrived quickly. Derek woke up early, went for his usual morning run, and then spent an hour reviewing the proposal that Maya had finalized the previous day. It was thorough, detailed, and exactly what he wanted to present to the bank executives. Derek dressed carefully for the meeting, choosing a well-tailored navy blue suit, a crisp white shirt, and a red tie. Today, unlike his visit to the branch, he wanted the bank's leadership to see him as he appeared in boardrooms and at major business events, polished, professional, and powerful. Karen, his wife of 20 years, watched him adjust his tie in the mirror. "You look ready for battle," she said with a small smile. Derek turned to her. "Not a battle, a negotiation." "Same thing. In your world?" Karen handed him his briefcase. "Just remember what you told me about your goals for this meeting. It's not about revenge. It's about change," Derek agreed. "Real, lasting change." The headquarters of First National Bank occupied the top 10 floors of a glass skyscraper downtown. Derek arrived 15 minutes early and was immediately escorted to the executive conference room on the top floor. The room had floor-to-ceiling windows, offering spectacular views of the city. A long mahogany table dominated the space with plush leather chairs arranged around it. Derek was not surprised to find that Richard Simmons, the CEO, was already there, along with Alan Porter, the regional director. What did surprise him was the number of other people present. There were at least 8 executives seated around the table, all looking somewhat nervous. "Mr. Johnson," Richard said, stepping forward to shake his hand. "Thank you for coming. I've assembled our executive leadership team because I wanted everyone to hear directly from you about your experience and your thoughts on how we can do better." Derek shook Richard's hand firmly. "I appreciate that. It shows you're taking this seriously." Richard introduced the others: the Chief Financial Officer, the Head of Human Resources, the Chief Operating Officer, the Director of Retail Banking, the Chief Diversity Officer, a recent appointment Derek noted, and several other high-ranking executives. Lisa Martinez was also present, seated near the end of the table. Once everyone was seated, Richard opened the meeting. "As you all know, Mr. Johnson had a deeply troubling experience at our downtown branch 3 days ago. He's here today to discuss that incident and, I hope, to help us learn from it." All eyes turned to Derek. He could feel the tension in the room. These executives were worried about losing a $1.7 billion account, worried about potential negative publicity, worried about their jobs if this went badly. "Thank you for arranging this meeting," Derek began, his voice calm and measured. "What happened on Monday was unfortunately not a unique experience for me. Throughout my life, I've faced similar situations, being judged by my appearance rather than my character or accomplishments." He paused, looking around the table. "But I'm not here to complain about one bad experience or to demand that someone be fired. I'm here because I see an opportunity for First National Bank to become a leader in addressing a problem that exists throughout the banking industry and beyond." Derek opened his briefcase and removed several copies of the proposal that Maya had prepared. He handed them to Richard, who distributed them around the table. "What I'm proposing is a comprehensive approach to creating real change within your institution," Derek explained as the executives began to review the document. "It has 3 main components: education, investment, and accountability." The next 20 minutes, Derek walked them through his proposal. He spoke about creating a robust diversity and inclusion training program that would go far beyond the standard corporate presentations. He outlined plans for a $50 million fund to be administered by the bank that would provide loans to minority-owned businesses in underserved communities, and he detailed a scholarship program that would help disadvantaged young people pursue careers in finance. "The final component," Derek said, "is a system of accountability. This would include regular assessments of the bank's progress, transparent reporting of results, and concrete consequences for failure to meet established goals." When he finished his presentation, the room was quiet. The executives exchanged glances, clearly processing the scope of what Derek was proposing. Finally, Richard spoke. "This is extensive and impressive. May I ask what motivated you to develop such a detailed plan rather than simply taking your business elsewhere?" Derek considered the question. Two things. First, I believe that running away from problems rarely solves them. If I move my trust to another bank, I might avoid personally experiencing discrimination there, but I won't have done anything to prevent the next person from facing the same treatment. He paused, then continued. Second, I see this as an opportunity, both for First National and for the communities you serve. If you implement these changes successfully, you could become a model for the entire industry. The Chief Diversity Officer, a woman named Gabrielle Peterson, spoke up. Mr. Johnson, I have to say this proposal aligns perfectly with initiatives I've been trying to advance here for months. Having your support and influence behind these ideas could make a tremendous difference. Several other executives nodded, in agreement, but the CFO looked concerned. The financial commitment here is significant, he pointed out. $50 million for the loan fund alone, plus the costs of developing and implementing the training programs and scholarships. Which brings me to the other part of my proposal, Derek said, his voice taking on a firmer edge. If First National commits to implementing these changes, fully and genuinely, not only will the Johnson Family Trust remain with your bank, but I will increase our holdings by an additional $300 million over the next 5 years. The CFO's expression changed immediately. The potential addition of $300 million clearly outweighed the cost Derek was proposing. And if we decline? Richard asked quietly. Derek met his gaze directly. Then I will begin transferring the Johnson Family Trust to another institution by the end of this month. The full $1.7 billion. The room fell silent again. The stakes were now crystal clear to everyone present. Alan Porter cleared his throat. What about Patricia Wells? Do you want her terminated as part of this agreement? This was the question Derek had been expecting. No, I don't, he said, surprising many of the executives. In fact, I have a specific role in mind for her, if she's willing. He turned to a page in the proposal that outlined his idea for Patricia. I'd like her to become part of the team that implements the new training program. Her experience, making assumptions based on appearance and then learning how wrong those assumptions were, could be valuable in helping others recognize and address their own biases. Gabrielle Peterson nodded enthusiastically. That's actually brilliant, using the incident as a teaching tool rather than just a cause for punishment. Of course, Derek added, this would be entirely voluntary on her part. If she's not interested in that role, that's her choice. But I believe in second chances and in people's capacity to learn and grow. Richard studied Derek with newfound respect. Most people in your position would have demanded her head on a platter. Your approach is unexpected. Firing her might satisfy some desire for justice, Derek said, but it wouldn't solve the underlying problem, and it certainly wouldn't help her understand why her behavior was harmful. The meeting continued for another hour as they discussed the details of Derek's proposal. The executives asked questions, suggested modifications, and gradually moved from skepticism to engagement. By the end, there was a sense of cautious excitement in the room. We'll need to take this to the board, of course, Richard said as the meeting concluded. But speaking for the executive team, I believe we're prepared to move forward with this partnership. It's ambitious, but it's also exactly the kind of meaningful change we should be leading. As Derek prepared to leave, Lisa Martinez approached him. Mr. Johnson, I just wanted to say thank you. Not just for keeping your business with us, but for pushing us to be better. This could transform our entire organization. Derek nodded. That's the goal. Not just to prevent negative experiences, but to create positive ones for your employees, your customers, and your communities. As he rode the elevator down to the lobby, Derek felt a sense of accomplishment. The meeting had gone even better than he had hoped. The bank's leadership hadn't just agreed to his terms, they had embraced the vision behind them. His phone buzzed with a text from Maya. How did it go? Derek typed his reply. They're on board. We're not emptying the branch. We're transforming it. 6 months later, Derek pulled into the parking lot of the downtown branch of First National Bank. It was the same branch where Patricia Wells had humiliated him, but much had changed since that day. He sat in his car for a moment, reflecting, On the journey of the past half year, the bank's board had approved his proposal unanimously. 2 days after his meeting with the executive team, Richard Simmons had called to share the news and to express the board's enthusiasm for the partnership. What had started as an unpleasant encounter had grown into something much more significant. Derek entered the bank and immediately noticed the differences. The physical space looked similar, but the atmosphere felt entirely changed. The staff was more diverse, and there was a warmth to the customer interactions that hadn't been present before. Lisa Martinez spotted him from across the lobby and walked over to greet him. "Mr. Johnson, welcome back. It's good to see you. Please call me Derek," he reminded her with a smile. "We've been working together for 6 months now." "Old habits," Lisa said. "The team is ready in the conference room whenever you are." Derek followed her through the bank. Several employees nodded or waved as he passed. He was now a familiar face here, having visited regularly to oversee the implementation of his proposal. The conference room was at the back of the bank, a space that had been redesigned as part of the changes. Gone was the stuffy, traditional decor, replaced by a more open and welcoming environment. The walls displayed artwork from local minority artists, and the room was set up to encourage conversation rather than hierarchy. Around the table sat the team responsible for implementing the diversity and inclusion initiatives. There was Gabrielle Peterson, the Chief Diversity Officer, Alan Porter, the Regional Director, 2 branch managers from other locations, and perhaps most surprisingly, Patricia Wells. After the incident, Patricia had been given a choice: accept termination or join the team working to transform the bank's culture. To many people's surprise, she had chosen the latter. The past 6 months had not been easy for her, but she had embraced the opportunity to learn and grow. "Good morning, everyone," Derek said as he took a seat. "I'm looking forward to hearing about our progress." Gabrielle started the meeting with an overview of what had been accomplished so far. The $50 million loan fund for minority-owned businesses had been established and had already approved financing for over 100 entrepreneurs. The scholarship program had selected its first 20 recipients, high school students who would receive full funding for college and guaranteed internships at the bank. And the training program has now been completed by all employees at 8 of our branches, Gabrielle continued. "We're on schedule to cover all locations by the end of the year," Alan added. "Customer satisfaction scores at the branches that have completed the training are up 15%. Employee retention has improved as well." Derek nodded, pleased with the progress. "And what about the accountability measures?" "We've implemented the quarterly assessment process," Gabrielle explained. "The results of the first assessment were published on our website last month, along with our specific goals for improvement. The transparency has actually generated positive publicity for the bank." "The board is fully committed now," Alan added. "Seeing the business benefits of these initiatives has converted even the most skeptical members." Derek turned to Patricia, who had been quiet so far. "And how has your experience been with the training sessions?" Patricia straightened in her chair. She looked different now, more confident, but also more humble. "It was hard at first," she admitted. "Standing in front of groups of employees and talking about my mistake, about how I misjudged you based on your appearance. It made me feel vulnerable and exposed." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But it's also been the most meaningful work I've ever done. When I share my story, I can see people connecting with it. They recognize similar thoughts or behaviors in themselves. And that creates an opening for real change." Derek had attended one of Patricia's training sessions. He had watched from the back of the room as she bravely recounted the incident, acknowledging her biases and sharing what she had learned. It had been a powerful experience. "The employees who have gone through the training," Patricia continued, "they're not just changing how they interact with customers. They're changing how they think about people who are different from them. And many of them are taking those changes home into their communities." Derek smiled. This was exactly what he had hoped for. Change that rippled outward, affecting not just the bank but the broader society. The meeting continued with discussions about the next phase of the initiative. They talked about expanding the loan program, creating mentorship opportunities for the scholarship recipients, and developing advanced training for employees who wanted to become diversity advocates within their branches. As the meeting wrapped up, Gabrielle mentioned one more item. The American Bankers Association heard about our program. They've asked us to present at their annual convention next month. They're interested in using our model as a template for other financial institutions. Derek nodded, pleased but not surprised. This was always the greater goal, not just to change one bank, but to influence the entire industry. After the meeting, Derek walked through the bank with Patricia. It was a significant moment for both of them, returning to the spot where their story had begun 6 months ago. "I never properly thanked you," Patricia said as they reached the main lobby. "For what?" Derek asked. "For giving me a second chance. For seeing potential in me when all I had shown you was prejudice." Derek stopped and turned to face her. "Everyone deserves the opportunity to learn and grow. What matters isn't the mistake you made that day. It's what you chose to do afterward." Patricia nodded. "Still, most people in your position would have demanded my termination. Your approach was unexpected. Firing you might have satisfied some immediate desire for justice," Derek said, echoing the words he had used in the executive meeting 6 months earlier. "But it wouldn't have created any meaningful change, and change was always the goal." As they stood there, an elderly couple entered the bank. The woman seemed confused about where to go, looking around uncertainly. Patricia immediately approached them. "Good morning," she said warmly. "How can I help you today?" The woman explained that they needed to set up a new account, but weren't sure of the process. Patricia listened attentively, asked thoughtful questions, and then personally escorted them to the appropriate desk. Derek watched the interaction with satisfaction. This was the real measure of success, not the statistics or the publicity, but the simple human interactions that occurred every day in the bank. The way people were treated with dignity and respect, regardless of who they were or how they looked. As Derek prepared to leave, Lisa approached him one more time. "I almost forgot to mention, the sign will be installed next week." She pointed to a space near the entrance. "The Community Finance Center will be right there. The plaque will read, 'Dedicated to building a banking system that serves everyone, with dignity and respect.'" Derek nodded, feeling a sense of accomplishment. What had started as a humiliating experience had transformed into something powerful and positive. Outside the bank, he paused to look back at the building. The branch hadn't emptied after all. It had been filled with something much more valuable than money. It had been filled with purpose, with commitment, and with the possibility of real change. As he drove away, Derek thought about the ripple effects of what had happened. The 100 businesses that had received loans, the 20 students who would go to college, the employees who were thinking differently about diversity and inclusion, the other banks that might soon adopt similar programs. All of this because he had chosen not to simply walk away from a bad experience, but to transform it into an opportunity for change. His father would indeed have been proud. Derek smiled as he turned onto the highway. The $1.7 billion in his trust had always given him financial power, but he had learned that the real power came from how he chose to use it, not to punish or to threaten, but to create a better world for everyone.